using his legs is something that I really hope he continues to do, because that's the key here. They're all saying it is night and day. This is a different player than who they saw last year. I think it's only a matter of time until we see him get out there.
Everyone's chasing the top draft picks, but championships they are won in the late rounds. And today we are digging into the sleepers after pick 120 who could swing your fantasy season. We got one of the best in the game to break it down. Justin Boone from Yahoo Sports, consistently one of the best in Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings. And he is here to help you steal your league with these late round gems. Justin, how are you doing at this very busy time of year?
Fantastic. Just coming off a trip to Vegas with Yahoo, where we did some events there, which was a great weekend and really made me realize just how deep into draft season we are and how close the regular season is. And I'm sure you guys can attest that, like, this time of year, you're kind of getting ready to like go underwater, sort of, as I put it, for like the next 4 or 5 months. I also like it though, because it's like a conveyor belt. It's like you just kind of get on it and you just keep doing the same thing week in and out content wise until the end of the season. And I'm excited to be doing it at Yahoo now.
Yeah, man. Like, I'm honestly looking forward to the season because it's just easier. We'll just get into a routine and we'll just get going for it. Rich, are you the same?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a rhythm, isn't it? You kind of just get into that comfort zone of what you're doing each week, what you're doing each day of the week, what you're doing each time. It just becomes a process. Whereas, yeah, you don't have to almost come up with ideas, which is quite nice when it comes to the season.
Yeah, well, the people don't want to hear about our woes. They want to hear about sleepers. And we're going to start with player number 1 for Justin, JJ McCarthy, going at pick 136 in Yahoo ADP. Obviously had the season-ending meniscus last year that just completely curtailed his rookie season. But so far this offseason, really positive reports out of training camp. And it's hard to deny that he's kind of surrounded by elite players. He's got Justin Jefferson. Of course, Justin Jefferson's not healthy. He's got Jordan Addison, who's suspended for the first 3 games. But he does have TJ Hawkinson. They do have Adam Thielen, who they've just traded for. How much are you expecting JJ McCarthy to be able to hit the ground running, Justin?
I think he's going to do well right from the jump. And I don't understand why more people aren't talking about this guy. I mean, the sophomore QBs have gotten a lot of hype this year, but I feel like it's mostly been, Caleb Williams. It's mostly been Drake May. Obviously, we know Jaden Daniels is great, but JJ McCarthy could end up being, just as good as May or Williams this year. And I just don't think that people are acknowledging that. And he's going to this system where, let's face it, Kevin O'Connell, I think he's one of the best coaches, and I think he's one of the best play callers in the league. And over the last year, it's unfortunate that we had that McCarthy injury last season. I think at some point last year, he might have got a shot to start, but he's had a year to learn this system. He's been meeting with O'Connell every week. He is comfortable there now, right? And yes, you got to get out there and the bullets have to fly around you and you got to get that experience, no doubt. But this is a guy that they drafted early in the first round. They handpicked him to be their franchise quarterback. And fantasy-wise, I just look at what Kevin O'Connell's done here with the other quarterbacks that he's had in Minnesota, right? And you can start with Darnell last year. Darnell, the QB 11 in fantasy points per game after, not doing that much. I don't know what's the nicest way to put it, but like not doing much in his career until he linked up with Kevin O'Connell. And then he has this magical season last year, right? But it goes further than that. Like Kirk Cousins, he was the QB 7. He averaged 19.3 fantasy points per game in 2023. He was the QB 13 in 2022. Even like Josh Dobbs was the QB 10. He had 5 starts that one year when Cousins was injured. He was the QB 10 for that stretch. Nick Mullins, like total career journeyman. Nick Mullins, QB 14 when he spent most of the last month that year, the same year that Cousins was hurt. He spent most of the last month as the starter and put up top 15 numbers. And yet McCarthy going, as I think last time I checked, the QB 19 earlier in the offseason, it was outside the top 20 quarterbacks in ADP. I just don't get it. Something is missing here for me. And maybe it's that people haven't seen him do it before. Maybe people have question marks about some of the injuries, like you said, but I'm not that worried about the Justin Jefferson one. I think we all have like PTSD from Christian McCaffrey's situation last year where you have a first round pick in fantasy and he gets sat out for most of the preseason and you start to go, are we going to get the rug pulled out from under us in week 1 and it's going to be worse? They weren't making a ton of moves though, right? And they knew that Jordan Addison was going to be suspended and Jalen Naylor's been more hurt than Jefferson for a while. And yet all they did was go out and get Adam Thielen, which is a great move and is certainly going to help McCarthy. He has a little bit of experience in this system. He knows some of the people and the faces in Minnesota. And I don't think that Thielen's the kind of guy who's going to give you a full season of production, but sure, he can come in for that opening month and help out. But yeah, so many weapons there. You look at TJ Hawkinson, you look at having 2 quality backs now. Some of the upgrades that they made in the offensive line, right? Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Donovan Jackson, the rookie, totally rebuilding the interior of that line. This is just such a great situation that he's being dropped into, and he's going to be able to run a little bit too. Like, he's not a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson type runner, but he's going to add a little bit in the way that, like, Patrick Mahomes and some of those guys give you 200-300 rushing yards and kind of boost up their fantasy totals. So I don't know why people aren't more excited about McCarthy. Tell me if I'm crazy.
Yeah, well, Rich, go on. I mean, like, I know you come to things more from a dynasty perspective, writing for DLF, and you quite often have an eye on like buys and sells across a much bigger spectrum than a lot of people do. How has your mindset kind of changed on JJ over the last year since his injury?
I think for me, long term, it's not changed at all. Like, I agree with everything said around the situation, the surrounding talent, the offensive play caller. I think they're all incredible. And I think if we're looking at JJ McCarthy as a 2-3 year project in kind of a dynasty window, I'm really keen, I'm really excited, and I'm really, bought in. And I think he's massively undervalued. I guess where I struggle is the reason Sam Darnold did so well from a fantasy perspective last year was that Sam Darnold was aggressive pushing the ball downfield, and they allowed him to be aggressive downfield. We saw JJ McCarthy in Michigan, almost play with kind of handcuffs on. And, he didn't really get to run the whole offense, push the ball downfield, throw the ball a huge amount. And I'm like, if he comes in and O'Connell lets him be what Sam Darnold was last year, then yes, I agree. JJ McCarthy's going to be fantastic for fantasy. But if this is those handcuffs that were placed on him at Michigan, and we see, 25 to 30 pass attempts and an ADOT, sub sort of 9 yards and things like that, I'm just a bit worried that there's not the upside that we're hoping for, I guess, with a late round dart throw.
Isn't that like the same kind of arguments we were making last year about Sam Darnold, though, right? Like, and weren't we kind of saying like, wow, Darnold, he hasn't really done much in his career, and maybe he'll have some good games, but I don't think he's going to be great in Minnesota. And then has this incredible season, right? I also think too, the run out, like schedule wise for McCarthy, really favors a guy who's going to be getting his first starts in the NFL. Like, goes against Chicago week 1. Chicago's a pretty tough defense. They do have some injuries in the secondary that we'll have to figure out here and see whether those guys are going to be available in week 1. But last year in Chicago on the road, Sam Darnold, the QB6 overall for that week. So we know that this offense can produce in that situation. Then McCarthy gets the Falcons and the Bengals in weeks 2 and 3. They gave up the 5th and 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks last year. And he gets an early season bye too in week 6. And I think that's important because when you have a younger quarterback, that might give them a chance to reassess some things. And then we might even see a bit of a bump coming out of that. So I don't know. I think that the rollout is here potentially for him to have some success right away, in the same way that Sam Darnold, who we never would have expected last year to do it, ended up being a low-end QB1.
I think the underrated thing with JJ McCarthy that we've probably not touched on is the rushing as well. Like, he's not, an elite rushing quarterback, but he had 340 and 402 yards in his 2 years as a starter at Michigan. Like, he's not going to be a 1,000-yard rusher, but he could easily be a 300 to 500-yard rusher. I guess for me, the challenge is that Trevor Lawrence is going around after him, and for me, I'd pick Trevor Lawrence over him every day of the week.
All I'm hearing, guys, from this is that come week 3 against the Cincinnati Bengals, JJ McCarthy in DFS lineups is absolutely going to crush, because the Bengals can't defend the pass and they can't defend against dual threat quarterbacks. So very much looking forward to that one. Look, people, if this is your first time finding us here in Fantasy Sanctuary, we truly appreciate it. When you're done watching this video, go and check out the videos that we've got on the channel right now with Matthew Berry, Ian Hartitz, with JJ Zacharyson. There are loads of great content here to help you win in 2025. Player number 2 for you, Justin, it is Bryce Young, and real tale of two halves for his season last year. Like, it looked like his career could effectively be over last year. And then Andy Dalton gets into a car accident, and suddenly Bryce Young's back in the starting lineup. I think one of the things that stands out for me this year is that the offensive line's been retained in its entirety. And that's an offensive line that had a Pro Bowler in the interior last year. So is there anything in particular outside of the offensive line and outside of the obvious kind of addition of Tetoria McMillan that makes a big leap for Young, or is it just those as well as little bits that you saw last year?
Yeah, I think you were touching on it there. Like going back to last season, at the start of last year, Dave Canales shows up and he's like the quarterback whisperer, right? Like he helped Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield and all these guys kind of resurrect their careers. And this was going to be a big challenge based on what we saw in that first season with Bryce Young. But you hit on it. The offensive line was a really big problem for him in year one. The interior of that line was terrible. He was getting chased all around the field. Would have been difficult for any quarterback to produce in those circumstances. So last year he comes out, still didn't look great. And that's why I wonder when you think about like, Caleb Williams getting Ben Johnson in Chicago, is it going to take a little while before we see that offense really hit its stride, kind of in the same way that happened with the Panthers last year? And it took a weird scenario where Young actually went out and Andy Dalton came in, and then Young comes back and he's like a totally different quarterback later in the season. And maybe that was because the offensive line started to gel. Maybe that was because he just started to get more comfortable in Canales' system, but he really started to produce right after that week 11 bye. He was pretty good. Like for fantasy, he had the 9th most fantasy points among quarterbacks over the final 7 weeks. He was running a little more too. He had 20 rushing yards or more in 5 of his last 8 outings. Using his legs is something that I really hope he continues to do, because that's the key here towards him potentially being in that conversation as a low-end QB1, or him just being like that QB2 bye-week fill-in type. If he's going to get up into that, low-end QB1 range, he needs to keep using his legs. I like the weapons there now. I think McMillan, on top of just being like a true number one receiver, being that guy that could be a volume hog in the offense, he just allows everybody else in that offense to bump down into their proper spot, right? Like Xavier Legette was not a number one receiver. He could be probably a number 2, number 3. Jalen Coker, a number 2, number 3. Adam Thielen leaving, I don't think it's that big of a deal. He's a bit of a safety net, but it might actually be a good thing, because I think at this stage of their careers, Legette and Coker are actually, better options and can give you a little more than what you were going to get from Adam Thielen. On top of that, Jatavian Sanders at tight end. I think he's interesting as a pass catcher at that position. Rico Dowdle shows up in the backfield, and they've talked, and then they showed us in the preseason that they want to use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. He's a lot more efficient in that area than Chuba Hubbard is. So I think they are actually going to do that this year. So now you have this like nice little core around him. It's not what JJ McCarthy has to work with, but it's a pretty nice little core around him. And I think he's one of these guys that could potentially jump up and get into that conversation as a top 12, top 15 fantasy quarterback. And yet you're getting him well outside of the top 20 in ADP. And I mean, we're talking about sleepers here. I actually wrote up McCarthy and Young as breakout candidates. I always like when I'm going sleepers, I tend to go like way too deep with it. So I tried to even that out coming on here. But yeah, I think these guys are more breakout candidates than they are even sleepers this year. And that just tells you how deep quarterback is. And it's another reason why people should be playing in 2QB and super flex leagues, because there are so many good quarterbacks to choose from that these two guys I'm talking about right now often don't even get drafted, because in single quarterback leagues, you don't have to.
Yeah, on Yahoo at the minute, Bryce Young's got an ADP of 158, so definitely not getting drafted everywhere. Rich, do you see yourself drafting much Bryce Young this year? I know, but last year you took some heat for defending Bryce Young at points.
Yeah, I got plenty of abuse, shall we say, for my Bryce Young love last year. But to me, you're talking about him as a breakout candidate. I think at the second half of last year, he kind of broke out for me. Like when he did come back, he was a completely different quarterback. He looked so much more relaxed, so much more in control, and looked like the Bryce Young that we saw in college. And, you look at numbers, as you said, rushing more from week 8 onwards, it was 3.7 rush attempts per game. He was PFF's 9th overall graded quarterback. That's 40 quarterbacks from week 8 on. Like, he seemed so much more in command and was producing so much better. And then you've improved his surrounding talent in terms of the wide receiver core. I'm really excited about him taking that next step. As you said, he's had a whole off season with Canales. And this offense is going to be built around his strengths still. And that's the main thing. So, yeah, I really like him as a call. As we said, that sneaky rushing upside. I think he has got top 12 potential. And you're not even having to pay like top 24 prices to get him right now. If you're looking to, maybe go in a Superflex league, you go 1 QB early and then you wait and you take kind of 2 or 3 dart throws on that second quarterback. Bryce Young's absolutely one of those guys. Like we said, JJ McCarthy, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, those are the kind of guys that I'm looking at. If you can platoon 2 of those, I think you're going to be really, really happy.
Yeah, like I've lived in the Superflex best ball streets for the last few weeks, and taking one of the first sort of 5 quarterbacks and then absolutely sitting and waiting until you can get Bryce Young, Michael Penix, double dipping in that range. I feel very comfortable with those rosters. Let's move on, though, and talk about the running back position. A rookie, the first rookie in this list, going at pick 149 on Yahoo, Bhayshul Tuten. And this situation has been murky all offseason, Justin. Like, Etienne, he rarely plays consistently for an entire season, but he's probably the best pass catcher there. Tank Bigsby goes between being incredibly inefficient and then incredibly good at the click of your fingers, but he's a poor pass catcher. Now, Tuten, we didn't see much pass catching from him in college necessarily, but he's very much the new regime's guy. Like, they've gone out of their way to talk about him, but he himself isn't like this fantastically well-rounded prospect, should we say. There's flaws in his game, perhaps. Now, we can normally survive 2-headed backfields, but when you start throwing in 3-headed committees, that can be a little bit difficult. Do you think that Tuten's somebody who we should be looking towards the back half of the season, or do you expect him to just be the team's guy so much that he gets enough work from the get-go?
No, it's definitely not going to happen from the get-go, and maybe he would have had a better chance at that if he didn't have the hamstring injury that kept him out of some of training camp and maybe delayed his launch a little bit. I think we all were maybe, I don't want to say hoping, but maybe there was going to be a trade there, and that hasn't materialized yet, but there's still been a lot of speculation that either Etienne or Bigsby could get moved before the trade deadline, and that would obviously open things up for somebody like Tuten. You hit on it, though. There are so many things to like about him in a backfield where I think there's a lot more red flags and flaws with the veterans there. Those guys just haven't really asserted themselves as the lead back or even as somebody who should be like part of a 2-man committee. They're just kind of the guys by default at the moment. Where Tuten, I mean, going right back to like their new general manager, James Gladstone, saying in an interview that when he interviewed for the job, he brought up Tuten as an example of the kind of player that they should be going after on day 3. And then they do exactly that. And he cited like his speed, being able to like just change a game. Well, that's something that those other backs don't have, right? So if those conversations are happening amongst the front office, amongst the coaching staff, I think it's only a matter of time until we see him get out there. You look at what he did, even when he did get opportunities in the preseason, like he's just like shot out of a cannon, right? He racked up 24 yards and a touchdown on 6 carries in the opener, his first preseason action, added another 16 yards on 2 catches there, had another 41 scrimmage yards and a score in week 2 of the preseason. And again, he wasn't playing with the starters, so he's going against second, third string guys, but that's what you want to see. If a rookie gets his opportunity, you want to see him producing. He's showing that he can do that. And the obvious comparison goes to, the Liam Cohen connection last year with the Bucks and Bucky Irving being a day 3 guy and Bucky Irving being behind like a Rachaad White and having to overcome, Rachaad White and Sean Tucker and eventually being that guy. That's what I'm expecting for Tuten. I'll mention another scenario where that kind of happened, where a guy was very, very cheap in fantasy drafts and ended up being a huge difference maker. And that was Alvin Kamara's rookie season. Everybody looked at his situation in New Orleans and said, well, they got Mark Ingram and they had, a late career Adrian Peterson. And yeah, that Kamara guy's interesting, but I don't know when he's going to get the opportunity. And then I think it was like by week 4, Adrian Peterson wasn't even on the team anymore. And now we had this like awesome combo with Ingram and Kamara, and they were both fantasy starters. And away you go from there towards a great career. And it's not that Tuten's the same player, but he is such, and you said it, like a little bit maybe on the raw side in terms of being a prospect, but such a great athlete. 4.32 40 time. That's 100th percentile in the 40. Then you have the 98th percentile speed score, the 97th percentile burst score. Like, it is there for this guy to be a big play machine in an offense that is changing, where, Liam Cohen has had a lot of success in the times that he's been the offensive coordinator, going back to Tampa last year. He did it with a day 3 guy there. I think he's going to do it with a day 3 guy again, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of time now. We'll see the veterans start in week 1. This is one where you're going to draft them, and then you're going to have to hold for a few weeks or maybe till a little later in the season, midway through the year. But eventually Tuten's going to get his opportunity, and in my mind, he's the best back there.
Yeah, Rich, you know me, I'm always down for any opportunity to fade Travis Etienne. How have you been approaching this backfield?
I think this is one that I feel like I spent the last 4 months since kind of rookie draft season started saying, like, we need to call the Jets. We're getting a bit over our heels on this one. But the price has come down, because of the hamstring injury, as you talked about. He's now clearly the cheapest in this backfield, whereas we spent the last couple of months where he was, at one point he was the most expensive. And I think that the fact that now I can get him as the cheapest of the 3, I'm now back in and back interested. I don't think he's an elite prospect. You look at my rookie model, he was a 67th percentile prospect, which is good, but just not great. And I think there is a chance he can kind of come into something. But I feel like we're needing either a trade between one of the top 2, which it feels like keeps getting talked about. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but they're supposedly still open to trading one of them, or potentially an injury. But he's the exact type of back that you want to take as a lightly round dart throw, isn't it? In terms of, I always say I want good offenses, which question marks over the Jags, but I think they're going to be a good offense this year. I want young running backs that catch passes, and Bhayshul Tuten ticks all of those. So I can get on board now. The price, I feel, has got to a place where he is a late round dart throw rather than having to be that kind of first guy off the bench as such.
And I would say, like, fantasy wise, I'm not against taking a shot on any of these guys in this backfield because of the price, right? It's so cheap. Don't take a chance on all of them on the same team, but take your shots on different spots, right? Because they're all so cheap. Somebody's going to get volume here, and there's going to be production. And maybe if one of them gets traded, if you end up taking 2 of them, maybe you end up with the guy who gets traded to another team and the guy who's starting here. Like, there's a lot of ways that this could go. And because of the price right now, ADP wise, I'm not going to make an argument towards any of them against them.
Justin, do you feel like Tuten's the kind of player who kind of gets forgotten about in a lot of like home leagues and redraft leagues because like he wasn't a highly drafted rookie? Because there's a bit of a committee, do you feel like in a lot of people's leagues where they're only drafting 15 rounds, they're only starting 2 running backs and maybe 1 flex, but these are the kind of players that people are just looking at and they're going, you know what, I don't want to deal with that, or I need some production. And because of that, it's going to make him even more valuable when they get to waivers a couple of weeks in.
I think that's a great point, and I bring that up every year with rookies when you're talking about the deeper rookies, not the top picks type guys, but the deeper rookies. Managers definitely, they get frustrated. They have to make decisions. Injuries hit their lineups, and then they start to look at somebody like this. And if in the first few weeks he hasn't gotten many opportunities, that could be the kind of name that gets dropped. I always say there's like another stretch where you should look at rookies where it's like a month or so into the season. You can pick up a lot of those late round rookies that didn't produce right away, and you're going to benefit from that because you're going to profit when they actually do get, often like the post-buy rookie bump we talk about. When that hits, they might be on your roster if you were proactive on the waiver wire. Totally agree.
Well, we'll go one of your second-year players in a minute, but first, let's go to Rich, your guy that you're calling a sleeper in this range, and he's somebody who on Yahoo doesn't even have an ADP at the minute. I think he's at 174 across consensus ADP. Now, we know Cedric Tillman had this really impressive free game sample between weeks 7 to 9 last year, but then struggled a bit with injuries, the lack of consistency with the offense. But how high are you, Rich, on Cedric Tillman for this year, or is it just like a hedge against Jerry Jeudy?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it is definitely a hedge against Jerry Jeudy, but it's if we're looking for upside, and with late round dart throws, that's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a guy that can maybe get me 8 points a week. I'm looking for a guy that is either going to be a league winner or someone I can drop to waivers in 2-3 weeks. And I feel like Cedric Tillman fits that perfectly. Like, obviously, I was high on him as a prospect coming out. He had that very slow start to his career, but then we see that stretch where he was the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy points during that 3-game stretch last year. Yes, that came with Jameis Winston under center, but we've got Joe Flacco, who has a lot of faults, but is willing to take shots downfield, is willing to push the ball. We've got Cedric Tillman, who traditionally has a higher ADOT than an average receiver, is a threat in and around the red zone. Like, those are high value targets. This is a player that isn't going to need 10, 12, 14 targets a week to be a player that can hit your fantasy lineup because of the high ADOT and the red zone equity. He could get into your lineup on 6, 7 targets a week, which is intriguing to me. Yes, I think the Browns are going to be an abysmal offense. Yes, Joe Flacco could get benched halfway through the season, but I think there's enough talent there that for my last round kind of dart throw, he's definitely a player that I'm intrigued by.
Yeah, Justin, how have you been playing this Browns kind of receiving group at wide receiver?
I haven't. And a big part of that
the best answer.
It's not that there's not going to be value there, because there will be, but I don't really want to have to watch Browns games this year. I'm sorry, I have friends that are Browns fans, but I agree that like this offense might be just very, very unfun to watch. But there will be value, and because these guys are going cheap, I'm more than willing to take a shot on them. I just really haven't. I find in the later rounds, I'm normally going running back, so I'm not taking a lot of receivers at that point in the draft. I'm also curious to see what this offense looks like, because they have a lot of pieces. We know Jerry Jeudy's going to be involved. We know David Njoku's going to be involved. I think Harold Fannin Jr. is somebody who is really, really interesting because they're talking about him as like this chess piece that they're going to move around. That's how he was used in college. Could he eat into some of the receiver targets there and be used kind of like a bit of a slot guy? I think that's definitely possible. So I'm interested to see who's going to be the guy that steps up. I think Judy's going to get his. I think Tillman is definitely worth a pick where he's going. Fannin Jr. is not somebody you necessarily need to be drafting in regular leagues. That's much more for dynasty and very, very deep formats and best ball, that sort of thing. But yeah, overall, if I can avoid the Browns offense this year, I have been.
Well, let's throw it over to one of my guys, Darnell Mooney, last year's wide receiver 27. Got an ADP of 205 at the minute, so really going deep. And part of that has been linked to the shoulder injury. Back at practice today on Thursday, the 28th of August. Look, Mooney last year averaged 12.1 points per game in PPR. He had 5 games where he scored 17 or more PPR points. And it just feels like there is a real trajectory for this whole offense with Michael Penix. I know that you're quite high on the Falcons, particularly Bijan Robinson, Justin. Well, the one thing that really pushes me towards Darnell Mooney is just the fact that when healthy, he's going to be out there pretty much constantly. The Falcons play 3 wide receiver sets at one of the highest rates across the league. The only wide receivers with higher snap shares than Mooney last year were Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, and Justin Jefferson. Are you okay taking a dart throw on Darnell Mooney, or do you think that's got to be in deeper leagues only?
No, he's become a really good pick just because the ADP has fallen because of the injury. And like you said, he's back at practice right now. So assuming he's going to be healthy for week 1 or at least early in the season, he's a great pick. He's already shown that he can be very productive in this offense. I think they're going to get a quarterback upgrade this year from Penix. I've talked so much about how Drake London could lead the league in targets this year. That's, even with Mooney out there, I think that's going to be possible. This offense is just going to be much better. I hate the fact that the offensive line injury that they just had, that's unfortunate. That could hold them back a little bit. It's something that people don't talk about enough, like Rashawn Slater going down on the Chargers, or, McGarry going down here for the Falcons, but they're still talented enough. I really like Zach Robinson. And Mooney has shown that he could be productive in this offense already. So yeah, why not take a discount on him and grab him?
Yeah, if you're not drafting Darnell Mooney, then you probably should be drafting Kyle Pitts, because somebody else out there is going to be catching balls, and I'm going to bet my money that it is Darnell Mooney. Let's get back to one of your sleepers. And Justin, I know this is somebody you're excited to talk about. Keon Coleman with an ADP of 162. Now, one thing I always try to be cognizant of is being humble and accepting that sometimes I might just be missing on a player. And one player that I've consistently noticed a lot of really smart analysts talking up lately is Keon Coleman. Ian Hartitz was on with us last week. He was raving about him as a downfield threat for Josh Allen. Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros loves him. Mike Leone of Established Run has done some really excellent comparisons between Ricky Pearsall's production and ADP, and the same for Keon Coleman. So, Justin, what is it about Keon Coleman that's got you prepared to draft him at sort of pick 160?
Well, I will say, I don't know if people can see behind my shoulder there, but that is a Bills helmet. This is a Bills mug. I am a Bills fan, so we will put that caveat in there before I go off on Keon Coleman. But last year, my take on Coleman, like when rookies come into the league, I want to see, are they ready? Are they going to need some time? Can they hit the ground running and be a star? And it was pretty evident right away that he was going to be one of those players that I thought was going to need a little bit of time to figure out how to win in the pros, how to kind of beat, NFL level defensive backs. And then just on like pure athleticism and, the body skills, he was able to put up like some decent stats early in the season. This was not what I thought it was going to be, which was more like a Rashee Rice rookie season where he has this like slow run out. And then later in the year, he comes on. What ended up happening was in his first games, like right away, his first 5 outings, he had at least 50 yards and or a touchdown in 4 of those games. And it was like, okay, not a star yet, but a guy who's showing that he can contribute and that he could produce at the NFL level. And then around midseason, he was hitting his stride, right? 4 for 125 in week 7, 4 for 70 and a touchdown in week 8. And then he suffers this wrist injury and totally derails the season. When he came back from that injury, not the same player. They weren't using him the same. He wasn't producing the same. So then you start to worry, okay, was that just like an aberration early in the year? And, maybe this guy isn't going to be the player that they hoped he can be. But then this offseason, he shows up and everybody, the beat writers around the team, the teammates, the coaches, they're all saying it is night and day. This is a different player than who they saw last year. He is dedicated. That culture in Buffalo, I think, does a really good job of helping young players kind of emerge and become the best player that they could be. And now we're talking about like Deion Dawkins. I don't know if you saw the Deion Dawkins press conference where he was just gushing about Keon Coleman and what he could potentially be and saying that everyone is sleeping on him this year. I think that's definitely possible. Like if you look at the 5 games before he had that injury, he was putting up like pretty good stats that would like make him a potential 1,000-yard receiver. And that's not what I'm not here to tell you that he's going to be a top 10 guy, that he's going to be a superstar or anything like that. But he's playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They have a clear need for a number 1 receiver in this offense. Khalil Shakir has a high ankle sprain. So, there's going to be a chance where Shakir, if he plays early in the season, might not be the same. We know high ankle sprains can really sap players' effectiveness. So Coleman now is going to get this opportunity to get out there, to show what he can do, to try to establish himself as the alpha in that offense. And he also has, I would say like double-digit touchdown potential. He's that kind of receiver where he could see a spike in touchdowns. That ultimately would unlock his fantasy ceiling. As is, I think he's just a great value that you can get in the late rounds and could potentially become like a wide receiver 3 for you in fantasy. So not a league winning type, but a guy that's going to get into your lineup and produce for you. And then if that touchdown thing hits, then we're talking about a guy that maybe could get into the top 25, the top 20, and that sort of thing. But I just think we're writing this guy off way too early. He's 22 years old, going into his 2nd season. It wasn't that long ago we used to target receivers going to their 2nd season. Now it feels like if they don't put it up year 1, we're just like, that guy's never going to hit, right? I think there's still a good shot that Coleman ends up being a pretty good NFL player and a pretty good fantasy player.
And the Bills aren't a team who tend to put lots on rookies straight away. You kind of mentioned it, but like they're generally a team that like I'm a little bit skeptical of rookie production from the get-go. Rich, are you seeing Keon Coleman like as a buy in Dynasty and somebody you'd be willing to play in redraft?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I liked Keon Coleman as a prospect. My frustration last year with the Bills was I don't think they necessarily used him correctly. I think they tried to stick him out as an X receiver and say, you're going to line up on the line of scrimmage, you're going to fight press coverage, and you're going to be our X. And I don't think that's his best skill set, and I don't think that's where he was used most effectively. You look at last year, he had an 11.9% slot rate. Well, the Bills have come to this offseason, and it's weird me saying this, but one of the additions in the offseason has almost made me more excited for Keon Coleman, and that's because they brought in Josh Palmer, who can line up and be that true X receiver, but isn't going to take a huge target share away from Keon Coleman. So now Keon Coleman, yeah, he's going to play some X. He's going to be expected to line up on line of scrimmage, but he can play some flanker. Khalil Shakir is injured. Whether he's going to play week 1, we don't know, but he can hopefully get a bit more slot rate. And I think as a power slot, he could be phenomenal. So now we've got Keon Coleman, who, as you said, flashed last year, but hopefully is going to be moved around more and put in some more advantageous positions. that makes me really excited. So I like this as a shout, and I think there's definitely a world where Keon Coleman, I think he could be better than a wide receiver 3, Justin. So maybe I can convince you to bump up the upside a bit more.
Well, I'm glad you just made those points, because my new buddy at Yahoo, Matt Harmon, Mr. Reception Perception, he said a lot of those things that you just pointed out when I've talked about Coleman on the show and the way that they've used him, and that hopefully, they figure that out a little more. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because those are very valuable points.
Yeah, and one thing D-Bro over at Fantasy Pros has gone on and on about is how Josh Palmer played really good against man coverage last year. And if he takes the heat playing that man coverage, then maybe it can just open things up for Keon Coleman a little bit more. Right, we're almost on to the last player, but if you've made it this far into the video and you haven't already hit that subscribe button, why don't you do so right now? Because we are closing in 4,500 subscribers, and we have had a massive offseason, and we are going to continue all the way through to help you win your championship this year. Last player here, it is Okonkwo, going at pick 174. Look, he was excellent to end his rookie season. Then he was excellent last year for the back half of the season. Justin, do you think this can be a year where Okonkwo just puts it together and we see some consistency from him?
I really do. And, this is another one of those picks where we're going very deep on it. He's a guy that doesn't necessarily get drafted in like regular redraft leagues. My approach for tight ends this year has been try to get one of the elite 3. If I don't, target Tucker Kraft. If I don't get him, target Tyler Warren. And if I don't get him, maybe Dalton Kincaid or Colston Loveland. But if I end up like completely whiffing for some reason, Okonkwo could be that like very, very deep guy that has a chance to sneak his way up into the top 12 at the position. And, you mentioned it, the strong finishes to the last 2 seasons. Like, you look at him last year when the playing time finally ramped up, right? That wasn't until week 12. And that's an interesting thing about like last year, he was used in conjunction with other tight ends and stuff. We're seeing that change because down the stretch last year, the playing time increased and he averaged the 12th most fantasy points per game among tight ends, including top 7 weekly finishes in 50% of those final outings. So, really nice to see him show that he can do that over a short span. But then he comes back this year, and shout out to Nathan Yonke of Pro Football Focus. He does great work putting out all the snap count data in the preseason and during the season as well. But in the preseason, we've seen that Okonkwo is out there as a full-time player now, and that wasn't the way it was in years past. So that gives me some hope that now this coaching staff is going, okay, we can rely on this guy. He can be one of the, bigger target getters in our offense. And when you're looking for that like deeper breakout at tight end, you want an athletic player and you want a guy who has a shot to be one of the top 2 target getters in the offense. Well, I think Okonkwo can be that guy in this offense. Other than Calvin Ridley, what are we really seeing from that receiving core? We have a couple day 3 rookies. Maybe one of them will emerge. We have Tyler Lockett, who's 33 years old or about to be 33 years old and really, really faded down the stretch last season. So who's going to be that second guy in the receiving game? I think there's a chance that could be Okonkwo. And if that happens, now he gets right up into the mix potentially in the top 12, top 15.
Yeah, it doesn't really take very much of a tight end position. I think a lot of people don't realize how few touchdowns you need to really elevate yourself into the sort of top 12 tight ends. Like, if you're scoring 6 touchdowns, then you've had a very good season at the position. Rich, do you see a path to top 12 production for Chig this year? I feel like we've talked about him so many times and hoped that he could develop into this top end tight end.
Yeah, I mean, he's my most rostered tight end in redraft and best ball this year. So that kind of says it all. Like, is there any player or any offense that's seen a better quarterback upgrade over the first 2 years of his career to what it is now? This is a guy that's caught passes from the corpse of Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis, and Mason Rudolph. And now he's getting a number 1 overall pick. Like, that alone should be enough that, it can help him take the leap. Plus, as you said, going into that 3rd year, hopefully, he could be one of the few tight ends that's 100% snap guy. So, yeah, I love this call. I love the player, and I think as a dart throw, there's few better.
Yeah, well, we'll round things out there. Justin, this has been a lot of fun and some really fun players who I will definitely be looking to target in my drafts, and hopefully everybody watching will too. It has been an absolute pleasure watching you on the Yahoo Fantasy Show with Matt, as you mentioned, and it's been great to see your work over there. Is there anything in particular people need to go check out this weekend ahead of a massive weekend of drafting?
Just all my content over at Yahoo now. You can follow me on social media as well at Justin Boone. Basically, everywhere people are doing social media stuff, I'm on almost all of them. So come find me there. And I will say, guys, like when you threw out the invite for me to come, you guys do great work. I love seeing the work that you guys put out. It was very easy for me to accept that invite and jump on with you. And I'm glad we finally got to do this for the first time.
Yeah, it truly means a lot to us as somebody coming from somebody like yourself, Justin. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's watched this video. Make sure you drop your favorite sleeper down in the comments below, and then go and watch this video that Rich did earlier this week with a bunch of injury updates that you are going to need to know before drafting this weekend.